Good afternoon, Bob Forche, Supply Chain Pro to Know, back again with segment number 8 here, looking at Sales and Operations Planning Maturity Assessment of 13 key topics. We are now focused on process for product. And so what I'd like to talk about in this segment here is about moving through this design phase, product management phase, with more clarity. I've heard the expression data drives change. Products is always an emotional conversation when we talk about what products do we want to use, what products do we want to lose, which ones are giving us the most margin for contribution margin. We need to get clarity on the product lines and what we want to support. And that takes timing to be able to think ahead. So planning around trends, thinking about proactively what's the stake in the sand, when do we need to pull the plug, when does this thing start to dry up in terms of volume, how much is it going to cost to support it. We want to get away from the emotional conversation and the things like we've always done it that way. What we really need to look at are trends changing and technology changing, and think about how do we stay ahead of the curve. If you look at the publishing industry, for example, where lots of publishers used to sell and print encyclopedias, but that's gone when the internet showed up. So as things around us change, we need to continue to evolve as well. So getting ahead of that curve means we're constantly searching. We're looking for an extension of a product line or maybe a replacement to the product line as technology starts to unwind. How do we continue to utilize capacity resources unless we make plans for the next iteration? When the volume starts to decline, that cost doesn't go away. So we need to be very specific about how we're going to have something in the stage gate ready to launch to take over that utilization of the capacity. What we want to avoid is becoming the blockbuster that didn't see the Netflix coming. Along those lines, we need to be very focused on terms of how we do product development. And there's some really good stories out there when we look at some history. The Simple Elegance, Matthew May, who was working with Toyota for many years. Great story there in terms of product development in a lean enterprise. Michael Kennedy, another really good resource on product development. The voice of the customer conversation. So this usually takes time, and so we need to have a very structured approach. We need to have a standardized process. Everyone knows what to expect. It's a stage gate, so it's not, when we practice this, we become much better at it. Concurrent engineering means we need to be working with our supply chain partners, not throw it over the wall engineering, which always gets us into trouble from the supply chain perspective. So looking at internal partners, external partners, it's very often that key suppliers have a lot of product knowledge in terms of commodities, process, and they can give our engineering team a lot of additional input into best options and choices. So that's something that really helps move the whole product development thing a lot faster when we're not going down box canyons that we have to kind of come back and rethink. Another key element here is to focus on the customer segmentation. Not all customers want the same thing. Not all sales channels want the same thing, and that's true regionally as well as globally. A really good tool here, I mentioned voice of the customer, to understand at what price point do we want what level of quality and what functionality and what features are appropriate for that price point. And then that is tied to a tool called QFD, Quality Function Deployment, which is a review process. As we start to identify what's going to be important to the customer, we look at a set of criteria. How would we provide all of these from our engineering and process perspective? How would we provide all these customer expectations? And so we now start to understand where we have processes that will cover certain things, or maybe we find out that we have a process gap we need to understand or maybe develop or maybe hire for. So that's a really valuable review process to make sure we are able to deliver what's expected. And then the other piece of this QFD is to compare the competition. What would they be doing based on our knowledge of the industry and things like that? A really good practice is to have a proactive plan where we are thinking about product management lifecycle on an ongoing basis. A really good example of this is HP years ago with inkjet printers. They made it an objective to replace their own product line every 9 months. Two major advantages here. They are very able to manage their supply chain very specifically, very clear stop and start dates for the new product launch, and it also makes it a lot harder for the competition to keep up with the technology in that market. So some good ideas there. If we think about this again proactively, we're going to turn this into market share, and at the end of the day our costs are going to go down because we're not reacting to the problem, and we're going to have a more effective product launch in terms of the typical time frame, time to market. So that's a good discussion on product. I'm glad you spent some minutes with us here today. In our next segment, we'll talk about process, focusing on demand. So thank you for your time today, and we'll talk again soon.